Okay, just a quick little overview for those of you who may be hearing about this for the first time. If you're wondering where Uganda is, it's in East Africa. Sorry, the picture of Africa is not showing up well, but it's on the eastern side of Africa, about in the middle, close, bordering Lake Victoria. So, moving on. Not working? No. So here's a picture of Kampala, and this is where we have been living over the last little while. Kampala is a developing city. It is, oh, did you turn it off? Okay. It's a developing city. Uganda is a developing country, so not quite like Canada is, but lots of positive changes over the years that we've been there. We've been there over a period of 20 years, and we've completed 7 years in Uganda. So lots of changes. This is more of a recent picture of Kampala. You get a picture of that. The countryside is very green. It is very different from your typical picture of Africa, where it tends to be brown and dry. Uganda is actually very lush. The southern part of Uganda is actually very lush and green. The northern part is quite dry. So this is what the area where we lived in and moved around looks like. Moving on. Expect the unexpected. Uganda is quite an exciting place to be because you never know what you're going to see or experience. So the picture on the left, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a camel. Camels are not found in Uganda. And one day we were driving. This is very close to where we live, maybe about 2 minutes away from where we live. And there's a guy on a camel with a cell phone. He's actually off the camel right now. But I've seen him with a cell phone on the camel, chatting away and going at his own pace while the rest of the world is rushing by. So completely unexpected. The picture on the left, a little bit difficult to see. I don't know if you can see the cow on the motorcycle. You can see the tail and the legs. It's not fully grown, but it's not a calf either. So it's quite big. And this was when we were traveling outside, and we felt this is an interesting picture to take. And we took a picture, and the guys who were riding the motorcycle were laughing because they found it fascinating that we were taking a picture of their cow on a motorcycle. So lots of interesting things. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Loji, and she's going to share a little bit.
Okay, so the idea of expect the unexpected kind of became, I think it's becoming a life theme for us as a family. This verse is always kind of stuck out for me, Proverbs 16, verse 9. It says, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." And so we wanted to talk a little bit about this particular trip. We've been back and forth to Uganda several times, as Daniel mentioned, starting from 2003. So when we had come back in 2019, our plans were to stay here more or less permanently. We thought that was kind of our last trip. We would have liked to go back. We thought maybe like in 5 years or something like that. We had no immediate plans to return. So we had these very specific plans of what we were going to do here in Canada. And then maybe, Noah, you can go to the next slide. But then there was COVID and all sorts of things. And the school that we work at Heritage International, you can see a picture there. The head of school that replaced Daniel had to go back early. And so they had gone through a whole year where they did not have a head of school. Also, because of COVID, there wasn't as many international teachers willing to travel to Uganda, so they needed teachers as well. So we were approached about coming back, and specifically Daniel as head of school. And initially our thoughts were, no, this is crazy, this is not the time to travel. And so we had all of these obstacles that we felt were really insurmountable. So COVID was the big the big issue. We weren't sure how safe it was to go to Uganda, where the healthcare system was not as advanced as ours. We worried about our family here and leaving them behind. We usually, when we go to Uganda, we have like 8 months to plan, to figure out what to do with our house, rent it, and all of those things. And this was kind of a last minute. Here we were in March thinking about this, and we would have had to leave in a few months. So all of those, the transitions, we felt there were just so many obstacles. But that Easter, I think Pastor Bittner, I might have mentioned this before, but Pastor Bittner preached a sermon about the women going to the tomb. And as they were going to the tomb, they were getting ready to look after Jesus's body, but they were worried the whole time about who would roll back the stone. So they had this obstacle in their head, and they were thinking about how they could get rid of this stone, not realizing that God had already taken care of it for them. And that service really spoke to me, and Pastor's words really spoke to me. And as we were sitting there at home on our couch watching, and all of us were kind of looking at each other and saying, okay, I think God is talking to us. And we all kind of looked at that. And we had several moments of these where we would have a scripture verse or something that would say, oh yeah. And we realized that as we learn to put our trust in God and take that step, those obstacles one by one were removed. Every single obstacle that we thought, okay, yes, COVID was there, but kind of our fear of going with the COVID was kind of released. I was really worried about my mom and telling my mom that we were going back. And I remember I was talking to her, and she said, oh, I prayed about this, and I feel that God is telling me that I have to let my children go. And when she said that, it was like this huge relief for us, because I felt like, to me, that was a big obstacle of being able to go and without like leaving our family behind. So it was really hard. Micah also was, and he's going to share more about this, he was very intent on staying here and having his high school experience here, where he would be more independent, away from his family a little bit more. So he was very reluctant to go. That was another big obstacle. So all of those things were big obstacles. And we found when we overcome them, when we got there in Uganda, our first service that Sunday, there's a song that's really popular in Uganda, and it asks, who has the final say? And the boys refused to sing this for you. I did try to get them to like sing with the worship team, but maybe another time. But it says, who has the final say? And then it says, Jehovah has the final say. And then it goes on to say, he turns your life around. He makes a way where there is no way. And I remember sitting in that service thinking, yes, he made a way where I did not think there was a way. So definitely, I think when we learn to trust God, he definitely makes that way where we don't see the path, but he makes that path. And maybe Micah is going to share a little bit about his experience with that.
Okay, so when this idea of moving back first came up, it was like, I think January or February of 2021. So it was very early in 2021. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but 2020 was very bad. It was terrible. And at this time, the vaccine had just come out, so I was so full of hope. I'm like, okay, we're in the home stretch. It's just going to be a couple more months, and I'm going to be able to return to like the normal way of life. I'm going to go back to school, meet up with my friends, all that. So I was very hopeful that things were going to return to normal. And then this idea of like moving across the globe came up. I was like, what are you talking about? That's not supposed to happen. And I was very worried because, I would have been going into high school, and I was like, okay, I'm going to, get all these kind of freedoms, and all that. But moving to Uganda, I knew that, because it's not safe, you can't just roam around on your own. It would have to be more regimented and structured. And at first I was like very, very against this, but over time when, with prayer and like thinking about it and really questioning what did God want for me, I realized, going there would be attending a Christian school, and that would be good. And I could play sports all year round, and it ended up working out because when we went there, I felt so enriched, and I felt like I had a much better time there than I probably would have had here. So it ended up working out in the end. So yeah, who's next?
Yeah. Okay. you can, yeah. I'm just going to briefly touch on some of the things in terms of challenges. I remember when we decided to go, we ended up at the airport. It was during COVID, and we all packed and ready to go. And I think it was my brother who was dropping us off. And as he's pulling in, I see a group of people in hazmat suits, as in fully covered from head all the way to toe. Yeah, and obviously I could see it was because of COVID. And I was looking at them intently, a group, and I'm thinking, okay, is it safe to travel? That was my thought. We are already packed. So not a fun way to begin the journey itself. But, you know, God kept us safe, and we got there safely and no issues, and all was good. So COVID was a big challenge both here and there. And there they had strict rules, especially with regards to school. I don't know if you know this, but Uganda had the longest school closure for COVID in the world. So they actually took a very very cautious approach to dealing with COVID. Partly because in the early 2000s, when we first went there, they had something similar where they had to deal with an AIDS epidemic. And that, unfortunately, killed a lot of people. When we first went to Uganda, the average age in Uganda was 14. So you can imagine a whole segment of the population was wiped out. And since then, it has improved. And so the government took a very, very cautious approach to dealing with COVID. But while we were there, as COVID was coming to an end, there was another challenge that popped up, which was Ebola. Now, when most of you hear of Ebola, there's probably fear that creeps in, and that is true there as well. Ebola is extremely dangerous. It has a very high mortality rate, and there was an outbreak of Ebola right after COVID. And so first, we were fairly optimistic because the outbreak took place fairly far away from the capital city, and then to our dismay and disappointment, somehow somebody came to the city, and now it was detected within the main city itself, and there were, again, back to the same precautionary steps and all of those kinds of things. So that was a big challenge. And then working at the school, lots of different challenges. One big challenge that we had to deal with was land issues. I'm not a negotiator or anything of that sort, but we unfortunately ran into land issues with one of our school neighbors who was trying to take over some part of land from the school. So that just blew into a whole big thing, and that turned out to be a big challenge. And kind of a related challenge with COVID was the financial operation of the school. As you know, it's an independent school, it's a mission school, and the school is operated purely based on funds that are collected there. So there's no outside help that comes in, no external support, so we rely completely on the school fees that are collected to operate the school. And when school fees are not there, then you can't operate the school. Right? You can't pay staff, you can't take care of expenses, and all of those kinds of things. And so when the school, or all schools, moved to online, it created an interesting challenge. Because now all of a sudden, if you're providing only online services, now whoever wants online services can get those online services from any part of the world. Right? Why should they get it from this particular school? They could go to a school in Canada or US or anywhere else and get that service. So trying to come up with a model that worked and that excelled was a bit of a challenge. And then trying to balance all of the finances and making all of this work was also a big challenge. Just to, sorry to dwell on this, but just to give you an idea. Online learning requires internet access. To have internet access requires electricity. Now, if your electricity goes out, you have no internet access. If your internet access goes out, you have no online education, right? So electricity was going off quite frequently because of the circumstances in the city, and especially when the weather is bad. If there's a storm, it blows off some power lines, and the utility company usually will shut off a section of the power, and then now you're stuck, right? And so teachers are in the middle of teaching, and boom, electricity goes out, internet goes out, online learning comes to a halt, which unfortunately is not a good situation to be in. So those are some of the challenges, very unusual for a place like, unusual in the sense that it's not kind of the same challenges that we face over here. Highlights, even in the midst of all of this, the school actually grew and grew significantly. And so it is truly amazing to see what God is able to do. And just give you a quick example of something. I mean, one big solution that was needed was the power issue. We had a generator, the generator wasn't working properly, and it required all kinds of maintenance. And then we needed to get a new generator. That means spending money, which we don't have lots of. So finally, in frustration, I looked around, and finding a generator itself is difficult. But to my utmost surprise, there was a Caterpillar generator made in the US with auto start capability, which means that when the power goes off, it automatically will start. And we were able to purchase it and install it. And that shifted the problem away from trying to manage with students by telling them something else to do. We were able to solve it and to focus more on the online learning. So school growth was incredible to see. And so again, we were blessed in that sense. School development, and during this time, the school was also able to develop and to move forward. We were able to do things that we had envisioned for the school. So that was kind of nice to see. My first year, 20 years ago, when I first went to the school, there was always this dream of building a swimming pool at the school. That dream has been at the school for 20 years. And last year, it finally happened, right? Almost happened. Sorry, it's not complete yet. It's getting there, but at least it's getting there. So, so it's incredible to see, even in the midst of all of these challenges, God is able to provide and to take care of things. Personal growth, I think through all of these challenges, I think I have grown in terms of, I must say, trusting God to take care of the situation. I shared a story. I may have shared it before, but I'll share it again. This is shared with Pastor Ben briefly. 20 years ago, when I first got there, again, the school was small, less than 100 students, struggling to make it all work. One of our big challenges then was also financial. We had a loan, and the bank required payments on the loan, and the number of students that we had made it very challenging to take care of the bank payments plus the expenses. I remember sitting with the finance team and trying to figure out a solution, and we worked out a solution. We said, okay, let's go and talk to the bank and just adjust the loan, right? Let's first try and ask them to reduce the interest rate, and hopefully our payments will go down. And if they say no to that, let's ask them to extend the period of the loan. So I think we had a 6-year or 10-year term. The thought was if we extend it to 15 years, then our monthly payments will go down, and we would be able to make all of that work. So I remember we set up an appointment with the loan department. We went, we met, and the bank declined both of those options. And I remember coming back and thinking to myself, God, I have no idea what I'm going to do, right? Because we have these expenses. We have to pay the bank. There is no other option. We are not getting enough money to make it work. Here we thought we had come up with a good idea, and no solution, right? So anyway, had to move on. So the best option was to manage our costs as much as possible. So our expenses were tightly controlled, and then we kept going. Shortly after that, a couple of weeks after that, we had a prospective parent come in. This family came in, and as usual, I would meet with them and take them around and show them the school and the program that we offered and all of that. And as I'm taking them around, I could gather from the conversation that they were quite well off. And I was thinking to myself, oh, they're going to pick the International School of Uganda, which is the long-established school which everybody who has money goes to, and that's where these people are going to go, is my thought. But anyway, I politely took them around, and that was it. Came back. We parted ways. A couple of days later, they come back, and to my utmost surprise, they enrolled 3 kids, and they paid full annual fees for all 3 kids, right? Now, this happened 20 years ago. I'm sharing because it's not confidential anymore. God took care of the situation a little differently from how I envisioned the solution, right? I envisioned the solution through the bank. I thought the bank would be the best way to solve the problem, right? God solved it differently. He took care of it, right? He needed me to trust and to move on, right? So one of the things that I've learned in terms of my own personal growth is that I need to trust. I know sometimes it is difficult, and at the end, I'm going to share a brief devotion on that, but I just thought I will share those thoughts. And Noah is going to share a little bit about the impact of the church. Sorry?
Okay, so I'm going to share about a little bit of my personal growth from my time in Uganda. I think one of the main highlights and things that helped me grow as a person was the ability to interact with other young believers around my age. So it was really nice and helpful just be able to talk with people who are going through similar challenges and questions, and learn also from older students that had also gone through that stuff and were willing to help. So a lot of my personal growth came through that, but also I was given some opportunities to help other people, and also just seeing the churches and how they just faithful they were despite their circumstances. That was also very inspiring. So, yeah.
And I think kind of touching on what Noah said, we just wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of the church there, and I guess the Church of God in Uganda. And for us, like, we only realized when we were there last time that it's been 20 years since we first started going to Uganda. And so one of the things, just working at Heritage, when we started, it was such a small school, very limited opportunities for students in high school and things like that. And there was a mom who came, and maybe she was on the board, but she came for graduation this year. So she hadn't been at the school for a very long time, but she came back, and she was saying, I wish I didn't have to send my kids to boarding school, because when her kids were there 20 years ago, there wasn't it wasn't possible for them to continue their high school in Kampala. She had to send them to Kenya for boarding school. And she was ecstatic, like, here now we have a graduating class. Students can stay with their parents. They don't have to go to boarding school. So that was the original vision of of the group who founded Heritage International School. So it was a group of different missionaries from different missions, and they wanted to give families the opportunities to have Christian education in Kampala and for them to be able to stay together. And I thought, wow, in 20 years, it took some time, but there are now opportunities for those families to stay together. And so that was one thing I was thinking about. The other is, maybe Noah can show this picture. So if you look at the pictures kind of on the left, that was from our first work camp in 2003. This was a church in Wa-Bigelow. It was a little church of God in a slum area. It was a very tiny church, just boards put together, very limited facilities. Over the 20 years, they were able to purchase land, move into a much more spacious area. You can see it's a lot greener. When we went back in 2019, they had a double-story high school building. So they started from this little nursery school and primary school. You can see now they have a high school. Well, Daniel will show some pictures, and we showed some last year too, but Fairview was really helpful in, like, we bought science equipment and set up their science lab, because in order to be certified as a school and to be able for the students to write exams, they need to have a science lab that's inspected and up to code and all of that. So Fairview was really helpful with that. And so that you can see the science lab on the top floor there. And there was, at the very top picture, you can see there's a bunch of kids singing and dancing, and that was part of a celebration. So this was their 25th anniversary since they first began. And so they had a celebration, and it was amazing to see some of the kids come back and talk about what their lives were like and how they've changed. So some of the kids who started in that little shack now have gone on. They went with the school. Some of them went to the new location. Some of them graduated, whatever. Some of them have become doctors. They've become lawyers, different teachers, pastors. It was like graduating class after graduating class. They came back and they spoke about them. And many of them were sponsor children. So they talked about how they wouldn't have been able to go to school unless they were sponsored. So they realized how much the church cared for them, how the church came and found them and helped their parents and their mothers. So it was like for us to be able to see that. I know many of you are sponsored children, so you can see that that impact is there. And it's an impact for the child, but also for the family, because now they've gone on and they're doing other things in the community. So it was definitely a highlight. And it was hard for us this year, like with all the different Ebola and COVID, we didn't get to do as many church visits, but this was one of the things that really stood out to us as a highlight. Okay, so again, some of you might have seen pictures before or heard us talk about this. So our main jobs, our 9-to-5 jobs, and more often, especially if you're a teacher, was at Heritage International School. So this is where we spent our time teaching. Daniel was the head of school, the boys were at school. So a lot of our time was spent at Heritage, and part of that was, again, encouraging kids in their Christian growth and also just providing good education for those kids. Oh, Daniel, do you want to?
So this is a project. I think we shared a few pictures last time as well, last summer. Projects that Fairview was involved in. We were able to get desks and school supplies to different schools. These are local schools. You can see the picture on the left with lots of students. Part of that is because of COVID. 2 years of COVID created a bit of an issue where many schools shut down, and many schools are privately run, and because 2 years they couldn't open the schools, and so they just simply went out of business or collapsed. And so because of that, the ones that did open when restrictions were lifted were overcrowded, and you can see a picture there, and so supplies helped, and we supported, or Fairview supported with Science Lab desk counters and equipment and all of that. Next. So this is a project that I worked on this year. And as many of you know, I'm into technology stuff, and it's still an area of interest for me. I got an idea that I wanted to explore and look at, and the idea was to help these rural schools to get resources. And one of the two big challenges that they have is in terms of teachers as well as teaching resources. So both of these are big challenges for rural schools, small schools distributed across Uganda. So the idea was to connect them via the internet, get an internet connection, and have a large screen TV or a smart screen TV installed, hooked up to the internet, so that the teachers or the adults at the school could access content online and also use that content for the learning of the students when there is a teacher in class or when they don't have a teacher. So for example, many of these schools may not have a qualified science teacher, right? Because they just are unable to find one. One of the issues with rural schools like this is that many teachers don't want to go out into the villages to teach. They all want to be in towns and cities. Similar problem probably here in North America as well, and in many other parts of the world. So when they don't have a science teacher, then what happens at a school? Well, they try to manage, but this way, the idea is that using online resources, at least we can curate the resources and have videos and things available, and students would be able to learn from it. And so this was a test project that I did just before leaving Uganda. We finally got all the pieces together. It took a while to set up the internet connection and get the whole thing working. You can see on the left the teachers watching and learning how to use it's just a TV hooked up to the internet, how to access information. Right now, that particular picture is a physics demonstration. Law of reflection. I don't know if you can see the ray of light landing and reflecting, but it's just a science lesson, which is part of their curriculum. So just showing them how to access different resources. The one on the right is the actual school itself. It's in a rural setting. So the thought is that internet accessibility will improve over time, and setting this up will make it possible for schools like this to improve the quality of the education that they provide. I was really excited after I got here a couple of weeks ago. I read on Ugandan news channel that the Ugandan government has put money towards subsidizing internet to reduce the cost by 50%. So, which is a huge, big step, and a lot of these schools hopefully will be able to manage the running cost. So Fairview was instrumental in taking care of the cost for the TV. So some of the funds that were provided was used to purchase the TV, but the internet connection and the running cost of that, they will be maintaining it. The school will be maintaining. So something a little different. So this is hopefully something that'll work, and other schools will be able to pick up and use. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about some of the churches we went to in Kampala. So the churches there are different than Fairview. I would say the worship is not more vibrant, but not in not in that way. It's very passionate. You can tell that even though they don't know necessarily how to sing or how to play, they're still worshiping God the best they can. So we mainly circled between 3 churches in the 3 different regions of Kampala. One called Matungo, one called Bukasa/Murchison Bay, and one in Kasubi. So they're all roughly named after the different regions that they're located in.
Okay, so approximately once a month or once every 2 months, we'd go out into a rural area and visit a church there. So on the left, you'll see an area called Nansana, which is not so much a rural area anymore. I can even remember back in 2018, it was totally rural, like green grass, whatnot. But now it looks more like Markham is to Toronto than a rural area. But you can see Dad is preaching a message there. And then the other one on the right is in Katovu. I think this one we went with the work camp, no? Yeah. So next slide. Yeah. So there was a work camp coming from Western Canada Church of God. So we met with people from Alberta, and we met here, and visited this rural church, and I think we spent only one day there. Yeah, we used to do overnight trips, but this time I don't think we did any. Yeah.
So Pastor wanted me to share a meditation or a thought. As we read earlier, Jeremiah 17, 7 is what I'm going to focus on. And Jeremiah 7:17, just that particular verse, I'm not going to focus on the whole 7 and 8. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. The same thought is in other parts of the Bible. I've just highlighted them. In Proverbs and in the first two parts, it's word for word exact. In the last one, Psalm 84, it's a similar thought, but not quite exact. Now, when we think about blessed is or blessed are, we normally think about the Beatitudes, and I just found it interesting that sentence structure shows up in many places in the Bible. And I hadn't noticed it until I saw this particular verse and then started looking into it. And so I'm just going to focus a little bit about trust in the Lord. Now, when we are thinking about trust, all of us would like to trust God in all that we are engaged in, trust fully. But that, from my own personal experience, I can say that I fail short sometimes. Sometimes I'm able to trust fully, sometimes I'm not able to. And so I'm kind of in that mode. And we see this in the Bible. If we, for example, think about right at the beginning, if we think about Adam and Eve, we see that they had difficulty with trusting God. Because God told them, don't deal with this particular tree. Don't eat from the tree. And we all know that they did not trust God in that and went ahead and did what God told them not to do, right? And we see that in the beginning. If we see, so in that particular example, we see an example of failure to trust God. But in other places, we see someone who is actually trusting what God tells them to do. So, for example, if you're thinking about Abraham, right? God tells Abraham to pack up and move. And what does Abraham do? He does exactly that, right? He packs up and he moves. If we look at Moses, if you look at the incident at the burning bush, God tells Moses, he's on a mission, you're off to free the Israelites, right? And Pastor Bittner and Pastor Ben preached a series on the questions that God asks, right? And then one of the things that I remember, I think it was Pastor Ben who spoke on this particular one, about God's question to Moses was, what is that in your hand? Right? And I'm assuming Moses had a stick in his hand, right? And that's essentially what he had, not assuming, I think it is stated that he has a stick in his hand, right? A shepherd's stick probably, right? And God expected Moses to trust and to move forward. And that's essentially what Moses does, right? Now, I don't know about you, but if I was in that situation, I'm thinking that I would have had a little bit of difficulty doing what Moses did. Going to Pharaoh and telling Pharaoh, hey, let all these Israelites go. Pharaoh being an awfully powerful person, right? Here I am going there and no army to back me up, no big weapons to back me up, or no power to back me up other than God himself, right? That requires an awful lot of trust, okay? It's a little bit like if God told you to go and talk to Putin today and tell him to walk out of Ukraine, right? I think that would be a tough one. I don't know about you, I would find that to be a little difficult. But anyway, Moses trusted. We see Moses doing that, right? And we see that in other places in the Bible as well. So for example, if you look at Joshua, again, a warrior, a military guy, and he is entering Jericho, and the instructions that God gives him is not to storm Jericho, but to send the priests to blow the horn while they walk around Jericho, right? He has an army behind him, but God tells him not to use the army, but instead to use the priests to walk around Jericho, right? Blowing the horn, right? Now, that requires trust. I don't know if you've given it some thought, but I would think that requires some serious trust, because now you're thinking, okay, I'm going to send these people out walking. Maybe they're going to stand on the walls of Jericho and fire arrows at the priests as they walk around, right? I might lose all the priests, right? And so, but yet Joshua does that. And we know what happened afterwards. And what happened afterwards is a result of Joshua choosing to trust. Another example of failure in trust. Can you change it? We see this in David. Now, by the way, Psalms was written by David, and some of these passages were by David. But here we see David. Joab reported the number of fighting men to the king. In Israel, there were 800,000 able-bodied men who could handle a sword, and in Judah, 500,000. David was conscience-stricken after he had counted the fighting men. And he said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. Now, just a little bit of background. David, I guess during his military campaigns, wanted to know the strength of his army. And he gives instructions for his military top leadership to go out and count all of his fighting men. And initially, he's told not to do it, but he goes ahead and does it. And after he does it, this is his response. He is able to realize, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you to take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. Now, if we stop and ask ourselves, what is this foolish thing that he has done, right? The foolish thing that he has done is really not to trust God. He has shifted his trust. He has shifted his trust from God to the army that is under his command, right? So that is the big mistake he made. But in David's case, it's interesting because he is conscious of that mistake. After he makes the mistake, he is conscious of it. Sometimes I think we make the mistake and we are not conscious of it, right? But in David's case, he immediately becomes conscious of the mistake, and he says, I have done a very foolish thing. And he also acknowledges, I have sinned greatly, right? Not I have sinned greatly, right? So, so from this particular passage, the idea that David is, I think, sharing with us, through what we can learn from David, is that we need to focus on trusting God. And when we shift away from that, we sin or we move away from God. And it is very easy for us to trust in all of our things that are around us. We can end up trusting in the money that we have. We can end up trusting in the abilities that we have. We can end up trusting in the people around us. All kinds of things are there for us to trust. But ultimately, our trust should be rooted in the Lord. And that is the key thing that I want us to be reflecting on. Noah? Just wanted to touch on what Jesus said, and then I will conclude. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And all of us are familiar with this. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Okay, and this is what Jesus replies. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Now, there is no trust in this particular passage. Trust doesn't show up. Right? But if we look at what Paul writes, next slide. This is one of the famous passages, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, about love. Paul writes, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects and always trusts. So love and trust are closely linked together. So if we go back, Noah, can you move back? If we go back to this, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Given that love always trusts, we could read this a little differently and say, always trust the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, right? And we could think of it that way. I know it's not written that way, but we could potentially think of it that way. So I just wanted to leave us with that thought. I know this is an area of growth for me personally, learning to trust, and I hope that whatever areas that we are all individually dealing with in terms of challenges that may be before us or direction that God is calling us to move in, that we can trust in Him to take care of the situation and to guide us. And just from all of the various characters that you can see in the Bible, when we align with what God wants us to do, right, there is good that comes out of it. And that is what I wanted to share with you.